And Albert Watson is, or at least he was. I don't know if he still is. He was an attorney for the shaman, and what he's kind of amusing what he was saying about his defendant. Let's go on to the next slide here. He's saying that a lot of these defendants, he's talking about the people who invaded the Capitol, they're short bus people. And, he made a comment about them being retarded or not directly, and then saying they're on the spectrum. And so I found this interesting that, if I were Jacob, if I were the shaman, just shoot me. I'd really rather not say that my defense is I'm just an idiot who follows and does everything I'm told to do, and therefore you should let me go because I just do what I'm told to do and I don't know any better. That's the kind of defense that the Nazi guards in the prison camps had, and so that's not good enough for me. But anyway, I brought him into this picture so we can go on to the next slide, because all I'm trying to do is mention the Capitol Hill occupation, and so we all know that happened in January 6th, but last June, almost a year ago, on June 9th, in Seattle, we had our own occupation, and that was when Kshama Sawant led a crowd of people in after this building was closed, and had an impromptu meeting, and does she have the power as a public servant to just declare a building open in the middle of the night and have a meeting? Most people don't think so. I mean, there are some resources to be considered and so on, but it was one of many things, and I just wanted to tie it kind of together here. So let's move on, because that's one of the I gave a new title to the Capitol riot American protest here, and I called it the crap here, because I think that's an appropriate description of what happened. And a year ago in Seattle, we had something. Let's go on to the next slide. Next slide. Yeah, we had the CHOP, which was the Capitol Hill Occupied protest. And during this time, an area was taken over, a park was taken over, and it made national news, and there's a lot to say about it. So let's move on. And yeah, there's another picture of it, and I found Waldo there. You can see him. And this picture, actually, I took out of a video. It's not, this picture was not lifted out, how we typically do some other place in the internet. It was in a video from a local, station, kind of like what we are, which I'm going to mention next. So just interesting that you're looking at a unique picture of the Capitol Hill area of Seattle during the CHOP protest, and so that this is a crowd. A lot of these
Keith,
people,
who is this
what are they
individual?
assembling for? Some of them are, politically oriented, like we are. They're some of them are just looking for a party. It's a huge mix of people, and I want to make that point. Let's go on then.
Keith, and who is this individual?
Oh, that's just somebody. He looks like Waldo. I don't know who he is. He looks
like Waldo.
He looks like Waldo. So, okay, getting to Kashama. So during all this time that this was going on, Kashama was there. She was making speeches with her microphone or her megaphone. And one of the things about Kashama is she doesn't get along with the mayor. And so one of the things she did was she led a march of people, of her followers, to protest at the mayor's house, which is inappropriate. And it turns out that, she's in trouble a little bit, because the mayor actually had a protected address for, death threats or whatever. So it was not okay for her to do that. And so that, combined with, occupying City Hall in the middle of the night, caused some people not to be too happy with her. So let's move on and see what I have next. Okay. So when this area was taken over by the crowd and speeches started, being, podium was set up, and the mayor said we were going to have summer of love, and she was all okay with the protests, but the protests, a lot of it had to do with supporting Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd situation. And so a lot of the what was going on, kind of had a lot of roots in anger. And so bad things happened. I mentioned already that the people who went into the area were a huge mix of people from all over the place. And some of them came from outside, and they showed up with all sorts of intentions, and love was not high on their list. And so, this was the idea, but it didn't last very long. So let's move on to the next one here. And here's Kshama at the time. She's taking a strong stand, that the police should be defunded. And that's one thing that was going on, is a police precinct was basically under siege, and there was a lot of animosity being generated. And anyway, so she took the side of defund the police. And it's kind of you can think of what you want, but when you're actually on the city council and you're saying defund the police, there's a little bit of conflict of interest there, and I see a problem with it. So let's move on. All right. Okay. Now this slide. Okay, Converge Media is a very small organization in Seattle. They're kind of like Uphill Media. They're local, and I watch them. I subscribe to them, Big O and Trey, and they tell me what's going on in local Seattle stuff, local community, concerns. I used to live in the south end of Seattle, and if I met them, that's the first thing I would tell them. That would break the ice, because the south end of Seattle is where all the minority people were forced through the years by redlining originally to live, and then when redlining stopped in Seattle, and whether it's still around at all or not, that's a discussion for another day. But still, even though it's still traditionally the south end is still traditionally the area where most minorities live. Justin Carter is a local guy who runs a local newspaper called the Seattle City Blog, and so he's interviewed on this show. Big O reaches a point where he say, regardless of what you think of Kashama, she's got a good ground game, and if you want to talk about her, you better get your ground game good too, because her people got a really good ground game. And so let's move on and see what the heck I'm talking about ground game. What's he talking about? Yeah. So what happened in shop when the police couldn't go into the area and it was a free zone? Well, 4 shootings happened. 2 people died total, and eventually the police had to go in and shut it down, because what you had, this slide shows what you had going on. You had these guys showing up from, we don't know where they came from. They were armed, and they decided they were security. Since there weren't any police, they were going to be the police. And it became a very dangerous, lawless place. And I didn't want to even drive by it at night, because who knows, somebody could shoot something, and you could be in the wrong place at the wrong time. If you voted to defund the police, your 911 call is being routed to the Department of Peace and Unicorns, and they'll call you back in 3 to 5 business days, which is not as good as it used to be, because 3 to 5 minutes used to be how long the police would get there if there was trouble in the same area. And there's a lot of people hate the police, but I tell you, having nothing is worse. And myself, I do know that there is a right way to do the job. In most of America, it's not done in the right way. It could be done in the right way. A lot of people don't know what I'm talking about, but there is such a thing as professional policing, where your job is to maintain good order, keep people safe, and you're not there to make any judgments. You're there to, if somebody needs to be brought to the attention of the courts where such things are supposed to be worked out, then the police can make that happen. But you've got to have something. There were shootings in the CHOP, the Chaz, or whatever you want to call it. It had another name besides the Capitol Hill occupation zone, and or protest. And you just can't throw these things away. So one of the things that Kashama did was, she was, Carmen Best was one of the. I really liked her. She was a good, policewoman, and she was one of the assistant chiefs that had been moved into the. She had been moved into a vacant position, and she was acting as the interim police chief, and she was doing a great job. But she had Kshama Sawant had a problem with her, and so what they did was they cut her salary, and she quit. And I don't blame her. You get your salary cut. That's by the city council. You might wind up quitting. So that's kind of reasonable. But I'll read here what's going on. In the early morning of June 29th, a fourth shooting left a 16-year-old boy dead and a 14-year-old boy in critical condition with gunshot wounds. The four shootings, along with arson and several alleged sexual assaults, moved the city to act, calling the situation dangerous and unacceptable. SPD Chief Best told reporters, "Enough is enough. We need to be able to get back in the area." And, so I read that because I agree with it about 150%. And so let's move on then, and kind of just talk about the next slide. Just kind of talks about where Seattle is with their police force right now. 20% of the police officers have left the department. The morale is horrible, and how does defunding and making the police want to quit their job? How does that train them to do a better job protecting all of us and making sure that our Black community is properly taken care of so that their rights are protected? How does, taking, ripping up everything we have, nobody's even starting over, but now I'm ranting. It just, I live here. I don't like what's going on with this. And, I have a pretty strong opinion on it. So let's move on. And, in the next slide, so a result of all this has led to some people putting together a petition to recall Kashama Sawant, and then she won't be on the city council anymore. And I believe there were 7 charges that were brought by these people that that could justify the recall petition, because it has to be approved by a judge. And it went through, and 4 points were approved. And that is, one of the things she did is Kashama, and that's kind of what's really driving this whole report, is why am I even talking about her, is because she's an open socialist, as am I, by the way. But she has her own she's a member of the Socialist Alternative Party, which I checked into and will be reporting on in a few slides. But so one of the things that she was accused of doing is basically being negligent and having, the Socialist Alternative Party, make her hiring decisions. And then she also, has been using her job to promote, the socialist agendas platform, apparently, and that's against the you can't do that. And okay, and then she's in trouble for opening up the city hall in the middle of the night. By the way, this was right in the middle of the COVID-19 lockdown when just after it all started, last year. So, yeah, and then also she's in trouble for, leading the march to the mayor's house. So that's what's going on this summer. Is we're going to have in our local news a out of sequence election as Kashama tries to maintain her position on the Seattle City Council. And basically, who gets to decide this, by the way, and I'm going to put this out there, it all comes down to 1,500 people who live in Seattle, who live in the district she represents, because they're the ones that are going to decide whether or not she's going to be on the City Council anymore. Not me, not you, and certainly not anybody else. And should that decision be a matter of national concern? Well, let's take a look. Let's move on to our other slides and see what's going on. Let's skip this one here. These links were one for her, one against her. And this slide, I watched it in its entirety. And here she's debating her opponent, who she ran against when she was being elected into this position. So, I have many hours of being familiar with Kashama. So I have an opinion about things, but my opinion is not so important right now. I'm reporting on what's going on. So let's move on to the next slide, because there's one I want to get to. Okay, we can stop here. It's not the one I want to get to, but certainly one I want to talk about, because it's going to get into some personal things here. One of the things I did was I looked into running for a Seattle, not Seattle City Council, but my local city council, because I've got some interest in, things, and I wanted, what could I do to make the world a better place? Maybe I can get on our city council. And so I looked into it, and I realized that, well, if you do that, all your obligation is to represent your constituents. And basically, I live in a bedroom community, and the only concern of my constituents would be to maintain their property values. And not to do that would be negligent on my part. So why would I want to be on the city council? If I want to change the world, that really is not the place to do it. And now, granted, I'm in a very small community across the lake. There'll be a map coming up, and I'll be showing you my relationship to is Seattle. But this happened a few years ago, and I had all these things going through my mind. And so when I see Kashama and what she's doing with her position, I have a personal perspective. So some things go through my mind that might not go through an average person's mind just coming onto the story for the first time. So let's go back to the slide, because one thing I found out, being on a city council in the state of Washington, it's a job. It's a job you are elected for, but you do not get to do what you want to do. And so one of the things that I found out was being on the Seattle City Council is very defined. You're expected to chair meetings, attend meetings, and the other council members along with you decide what the agenda is, and that you're really working on as a member of a team, and you're not there just to do whatever it is you feel like. And so when Kashama, she was reelected into her position. So going back, she was actually on this Public Safety and Human Services Committee, and there were concerns, even though she was canceling it. And this is, well, read the title again, public concerns here. And if you're going to talk public safety and human services, kind of one of the places you would talk about the homeless situation, and if you're going to address the homeless problem in Seattle, attending a meeting that might talk about it would be a good idea, especially when you are the host. Now, currently she's not, or the chair rather, currently she's not the chair of this particular committee. I made the slide, to kind of teach myself, because how this all works. And so currently Lisa Herbold is the chair, and she's a member of it. And so what happens, these council people, that's half the city council, they meet, they do their business, and then during the regular meeting, they can report on what they found out, and they can vote and all that good stuff. So, so we can move on now. This slide was just to let us know, how defined the job is. Okay, now this is Seattle. It's on the left. You can see it. And where I live down here is Newcastle. And, that's, like I say, running for or thinking of running for our own city council, and knowing what our own city council is doing affects how I see the job of, or what people on the Seattle City Council should be doing. And maybe I can make that a connection clear a little bit later. And because one of the things I've learned is that politicians, they love to spend money. Oh my gosh. And so Kashama, one of her things is she wants to tax Amazon. And I would like Amazon to pay some federal taxes. I would like Amazon to pay a lot of taxes. But can the city of Seattle just decide on their own that, Seattle City, Amazon should have to pay 1.7% of the wage of anybody they hire in Seattle to the city? I mean, it's kind of I kind of see it as theft. I mean, I'm a bookstore guy. I don't like that Amazon took all my bookstores away. I actually like going to a store sometime. I don't like having to buy. I'm not a big fan of Amazon, but I'm not a big fan of theft either. And just having arbitrary taxes to take stuff away from Amazon, it's kind of not my thing. So, but I am entitled to as much time as I've spent looking into these things. I'm entitled to my opinion. So let's move on. And okay. This one I made because, political parties are of interest to me, where they come from, why we have them. In our Constitution, nothing said about parties at all. Our whole government is built on, and then after it started, political parties appeared. But because people found that by sharing common interests, well, I won't get into why they started, other than say they've been around for a really long time. And so I just made this mind to bring up the idea that there's a kind of a thing about a political brand where the Republicans are red, Democrats are blue, and let's move on to the next one. Okay. And so we have the socialist brand. Now, I said I'm a socialist. I'll say it again. But I don't follow the brand. But there is such a thing as a socialist brand, and it's even been taken over by, Taco Bell's got, has been using it with their dog, not recently, but, and then we've had a Macy's, as soon as the Soviet Union fell, Macy's stole their star, and, Axe deodorant, and they have an anarchy brand, and they had a little bit of trouble, how can you sell anarchy deodorant to a woman? So that's kind of interesting. I got into this, and they made a few mistakes in their ad campaign, and it's amusing. But anyway, let's move on. And I just wanted, okay, so Kashama's is that her brand is that she's a socialist alternative. And that means, let's move to the next slide, that she's gotten a lot of attention by other socialists who have endorsed her. And okay, Katie Helper, if anybody knows who she is, I follow her. She's a very nice, calming young woman who's very intelligent. And I don't agree with everything she says, but she's a smart cookie. I like watching her, and like I say, find her very calming. She, I tuned in one day and I found out she was having a Kshama Sawant, or was part of a Kshama Sawant telethon, and I actually attended this, and there were about 150 people attending it, and I went through the comments, made a few, and I was not accused of being a troll, which is good. And so anyway, looking over to the far right here, we see three men that I admire myself very, very much. We have Richard Wolff, we have Chris Hedges, and we have Cornel West. And all three of them at one time or another have endorsed Kashama. And so let's move on to the next slide. And here we see Katie actually talking to, I don't know if she's not, anyway, I introduced this slide because I already said I like Katie, and here I'm disagreeing with three people I admire, about Kashama. I was on Kashama's website, socialistalternative.org, and just for fun, I turned the .org into a .net to see what happened. And I went to this other website and it turned out to be the Socialist Alternative in Britain. So it turns out there's a large umbrella organization called the Socialist Alternative. And by the way, on the British page, which is red and black, black and white instead of red and white, they had a place to, join up for membership. So I signed up. But anyway, so it turns out there's this umbrella organization, and I went there, I read, their stuff, and it's pretty much a classic leftist, Marxist party, with the addition that they're also throwing in identity politics. So they're a kitchen sink for all things socialist, but they're a brand. And like, what does it mean to actually be a socialist? Are you committed to equality? To me, it's the thinking man's way to think. And I get there through this guy. I consider myself a Trotskyite a bit. I've read the guy. I look at his, his ideas. I look at other people's ideas too. But I put him in there because the Socialist Alternative is supposed to be a Trotskyite type of organization, and since I like the guy, it's appropriate that I should be able to join, I think. So let's move on. Yeah, and I just want to say that a lot of people. I did a couple slides on Leon because most Americans don't know anything about him. Most people in Russia actually don't know anything about him because he was suppressed by Stalin and basically, erased. And
Keith,
he was assassinated in 1939 by Stalin in Mexico.
And I think, Keith, you bear some resemblance to him, if I may say.
Yes, and I have my yeah. Well, that's true, and I'm happy with that. And he actually, what he was in charge of the Red Army during the revolution, the kind of the war after the revolution. They had a civil war, and eventually the Bolsheviks, who, by the way, I don't like. Leon himself, he joined the Bolshevik party, but he was originally what's called a Menshevik, and they were more middle of the road, where the Bolsheviks were very hardcore, more extreme, and also in my mind, hypocritical, because they weren't. If you believe in equality, how can you have a party that has limited membership? And anyway, I don't want to get into that, other than to say that, with everything I've been talking about, I should be my own socialist alternative, and you can go to my website there and see why, because I have all kinds of stuff environmental. And I do believe that socialism does have a connection to what we need to do to solve our environmental and all the problems that we have in the world, because our society is just getting more and more polarized. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and we got to reverse that. A happy society is a society where there's more equality. And anyway, so what really matters is, what you stand for. Okay, this last slide, so getting back to Kashama, I don't have to vote. At the end of it, I'll say, if we lived in the same city, the way I feel about her, I would run against her. And that, so I won't say I support her. I won't say I'm against her. But, when you're hired to do a particular job, you got to do it. And like, if she were running for dog catcher, I couldn't vote for her because I know she would be wanting to tax people to catch dogs, and she'd be letting them go in the middle of the night or something. I mean, she would not do the job. She seems to be kind of all over the place. She's selling the brand, and talk the talk, but you got to walk the walk. And if you're not walking the walk, what are you all about? There's got to be more behind you than the brand. And like right now, her big thing is rent control. And people got to pay rent. It's not okay to if you don't pay your rent, you're stealing. And it's a complicated issue. I do think there should be rent control. I do think there should be help for people that are in trouble. But at the same time, you got to pay your bills.